Any hostile move against US forces in the Caribbean will be met with consequences. That was the warning coming out of Washington just days ago, after tensions between the US and Venezuela quietly surged again. At 2:43 a.m. local time, Venezuelan coastal radar operators saw something they did not expect. A weak signal appeared at around 52,000 feet, moving fast, steady, and silent. Speed just under Mach 1. Direction north to south, running parallel to the Venezuelan coastline, but still over international water. No civilian code, no response, no friendly identification. Instead of turning away, the aircraft held its line. Inside the control room, screens brightened, alert levels climbed. Operators leaned forward, eyes locked on a return that kept fading, then coming back. The pattern was wrong. Too clean, too controlled. Within minutes, command channels lit up across multiple bases. This was no lost plane. This was a US Navy F-35 Lightning II, flying close enough to send a message. Instead of backing off, Venezuelan systems began tightening their tracking. Distance shrank, reaction time dropped. Procedures designed for war started replacing routine checks. This was not an accident. This was not confusion. It was a test. And in those first few minutes, someone on the ground made a decision that would push this encounter to the edge of something far more dangerous. If you want to understand how close this moment came to spinning out of control, stay with us, because what happened next changed the balance of this confrontation in seconds. What made this moment dangerous was not just the aircraft in the sky, it was where it happened. The Gulf of Venezuela sits next to some of the most sensitive air and sea routes in the region. Cargo ships, oil traffic, patrol flights, and surveillance platforms pass through here every day. Every radar station along the coast stays active around the clock. Nothing moves without being watched. For Venezuela, this airspace is about control. Any unidentified military aircraft nearby is treated as a challenge, even if it stays outside national borders. Years of sanctions, pressure, and close encounters have sharpened that mindset. For the US Navy, the mission was legal and routine. International airspace allows patrols, especially near regions tied to security monitoring. But routine does not mean relaxed. Pilots are trained to expect reactions, not welcomes. Inside those radar rooms, this was not a political debate. It was personal. Operators saw a target they could barely hold, a shape that appeared and vanished, refusing to behave like a normal plane. Every second it stayed close felt like pressure building. This is how miscalculations begin. Not with speeches, but with tension. Not with orders from the top, but with decisions made by people staring at screens at 3 in the morning. If you believe Venezuela was defending its space, press 1. If you think the US was testing limits on purpose, press 9. Either way, this is where the balance started to shift. Because once tracking tightened, there was no easy way back. On board the F-35, call sign Ghost 21, the cockpit stayed quiet. No radio chatter. No active radar. The pilot held steady at high altitude, eyes moving between the horizon and the helmet display. Then the first warning appeared. Not loud, not dramatic, just a sharp visual cue that every pilot recognizes instantly. Hostile radar energy detected. The source was ground-based, fixed position. The signal strength was weak, but the behavior was clear. Someone below was trying to build a track. The pilot did not change course yet. He adjusted slightly, just enough to test the response. Back on the ground in a coastal control room lit only by green screens, an operator leaned closer. The return flickered, 1 second solid, the next almost gone. He adjusted the gain. The dot came back, thin and unstable. "That's not normal," he said quietly. A supervisor stepped in. Distance, speed, heading were read out again. Parallel to the coast, still outside national airspace, still close enough to feel intentional. In a separate command channel, the report moved up fast. Possible a stealth aircraft, high altitude, low observability, no response to identification attempts. The instruction came back just as quickly. Track if possible. Do not fire. On Ghost 21, another cue flashed. Tracking pressure increased. Still no lock, but closer now. The pilot exhaled once, slow, then spoke into the encrypted channel. Possible engagement developing. Maintaining passive evasion. The reply was short, calm, professional. Copy. Avoid escalation. Do not exit patrol line unless required. The aircraft dipped slightly, changing altitude by a few thousand feet. It was a small move, but on the ground it changed everything. The radar return strengthened for a moment, enough to tempt action. Hands hovered over controls. No one spoke. 2 seconds passed, then 3. A decision was made. The order was not to destroy the aircraft, not to start a war. The goal was simpler and far more dangerous. Force it to leave. As systems shifted modes and targeting parameters tightened, the quiet routine of monitoring crossed into something else. This was no longer observation. It was the opening move. And both sides felt it at the same time. The shift was immediate. On the Venezuelan side, monitoring mode ended. Engagement procedures began. Warning tones filled the control room, low and constant, repeating every few seconds. The air inside the room felt tighter. Screens refreshed faster now. Numbers updated in real time. Every operator knew this was no longer routine. The Pantsir system was brought online, not because it was the perfect weapon, but because it was ready. In moments like this, commanders do not wait for ideal conditions. They act on narrow windows that may never open again. On Ghost 21, the pilot felt the change before he fully saw it. Tracking pressure increased again. This time it was sharper, more focused. The helmet display outlined the threat zone in amber, then red at the edge. He did not panic. He adjusted course by a few degrees, then adjusted again. Smooth inputs, controlled movements. In close air encounters, even small changes matter. 5 degrees can mean survival. Down below, the radar return finally held long enough to tempt fate. The target stopped fading. The signal stabilized just for a moment, long enough for confidence to replace caution, long enough for hesitation to disappear. A short command broke the silence. Engage. Force withdrawal. 2 missiles tore into the night sky, engines burning bright as they climbed. For a brief second, the ocean below stayed silent. Then the sound rolled back toward the coast, deep and heavy, shaking windows along the base. On Ghost 21, the alert came instantly. Missile launch detected. The pilot rolled hard to the right. The jet dropped fast, altitude falling thousands of feet in seconds. Countermeasures spilled behind the aircraft in sharp bursts of heat and metal. The sky flashed white, then dark again. Electronic noise flooded the air. Guidance signals blurred. Tracking struggled to stay clean. On the ground, radar screens filled with shapes that did not belong. Targets multiplied, lines crossed. What had been one aircraft now looked like several. Operators adjusted settings, then adjusted again. Nothing settled. No one spoke. If you believe this was a calculated show of force by Venezuela, press 1. If you think this was the moment control slipped too far, press 9. Because now the missiles were in the air, and from this point on, there was no safe way to pretend this was just a warning. For a few seconds, it looked like the missiles were winning. On Ghost 21, the helmet display showed 2 fast-moving threats closing in. Distance numbers dropped quickly. The pilot felt the pressure through the controls as the jet cut through dense night air. But then something changed. The missile tracks began to drift, not sharply, not all at once, just enough to feel wrong. On the ground, operators noticed it too. Guidance lines that had been steady started to bend. Speed readouts flickered. 1 track split into 2, then 3. No one could agree which one was real. What they did not know yet was this. The F-35 was no longer just avoiding the attack, it was shaping the fight. Electronic systems on board shifted modes automatically. Noise flooded the guidance frequencies. False angles appeared. The missiles chased heat and reflections that were no longer there. Inside the cockpit, the pilot stayed silent, hands steady, breathing slow. He did not need to outrun the missiles. He only needed to confuse them long enough. One missile veered off first, pulling away as if dragged by an invisible hand. The second followed seconds later, passing through empty air where the jet had been moments before. The shockwave rolled past the aircraft, close enough to shake the frame. Then, nothing. No impact, no explosion behind it. Just darkness and open sky. On the ground, someone finally said it out loud. Lost guidance. Only then did the truth settle in. The aircraft was still there. Still flying. Still in control. And while everyone below was trying to understand what went wrong, Ghost 21 was already doing something else. It was collecting everything. For 3 long seconds after the missiles lost guidance, there was no sound but air rushing past the jet. On Ghost 21, the pilot did not celebrate. He did not speak. His hands stayed firm on the controls, eyes fixed on the helmet display as the aircraft stabilized. The jet leveled out, then began climbing again. Altitude increased fast, speed followed. The engine pushed harder as the F-35 returned toward thinner air above 50,000 feet. Behind the aircraft, the electronic noise did not fade, it expanded. Along the Venezuelan coast, radar operators stared at screens that no longer behaved as expected. Targets appeared, vanished, then reappeared miles away. Bearings conflicted. Speed numbers jumped without warning. What should have been a single aircraft now looked like several moving at once. Voices overlapped in the control room. One operator called out a heading, another rejected it seconds later. Commands were repeated, settings were changed, then changed again. Nothing settled. In a command room farther inland, a senior officer leaned forward and asked the one question everyone was avoiding. Which track is real? No one answered right away, not because they were slow, because no one was sure. On a secure US channel, the report came through, calm and controlled, with no emotion in the voice. Threat evaded, aircraft intact, exiting engagement zone. That sentence carried weight. It meant no damage, no pilot lost, no wreckage falling into the sea. It also meant something else, something harder to say out loud. The aircraft had stayed just long enough to see everything. As Ghost 21 turned north and accelerated, interference continued to blanket the area. For several minutes, coastal radar systems remained partially blinded. Crews worked to reset sensors, unsure whether the jet was already gone or simply invisible again. In the cockpit, the pilot checked his displays one last time, then reduced power slightly. The most dangerous moment had passed, but the tension had not. If you think this moment proved the strength of US technology, press 1. If you believe Venezuela was pushed into a corner with no good options, press 9. Because while the missiles missed, the confrontation was not over. The sky had gone quiet, but decisions were already being made far from the coast, and those decisions would shape what happened next. By the time the sky fully settled, the encounter was already moving into a different phase. Publicly, statements were short and careful. Venezuelan officials spoke of vigilance and defense. They claimed their systems reacted as designed. No mention of missiles missing. No mention of lost tracking. Just controlled words meant to project calm. Inside military rooms, the tone was different. Logs were pulled, radar data replayed frame by frame. Emission patterns were reviewed again and again. Crews tried to understand how a single aircraft had slipped through layers of sensors, triggered launches, then vanished without damage. On the US side, there were no press briefings, no bold claims, just internal confirmations that the aircraft had returned safely, systems intact, mission complete. Quiet success is still success. But the real impact went beyond the aircraft. For Venezuela, the event exposed how quickly pressure can build when decisions are made under stress. One attempt to force a retreat nearly pulled the region into something far larger. For the US, it reinforced a modern truth of power. You do not need to strike to dominate. You need to control information, timing, and reaction. This was not a battle meant to be won on television. It was a test of response, restraint, and readiness. And both sides learned something they cannot unlearn. The Caribbean looked calm again by morning. Ships moved, planes landed, bases returned to routine. But everyone involved understood this was not the end of the story. It was a rehearsal. If you believe this was a warning shot that worked, press 1. If you think it made the next encounter more likely, press 9. Because the next time, there may be no second chance to pull back. And when that moment comes, it will happen just as quietly.